экспертов, которых я представлю по ходу работы. Значит, кому нужен будет перевод, пожалуйста, заботьтесь об этом заранее. Предварительный план такой. Все говорят по 10-15 минут по первому кругу, потом может быть раунд вопросов и комментариев, потом я дам каждому, я планирую дать каждому возможность высказаться второй раз, вот, тому, что было услышано и сказано, может быть, поспорить. Действительно, русский на втором, английский на третьем, по-моему. Значит, я первым предоставлю слово. Это круглый стол, организован совместно Академией народного хозяйства и государственной службы, посольством Голландии в России. И мы первым предоставим слово профессору Картикайзену, нашему почетному гостю из Голландии, который пострадал, как и вся Голландия, от голландской болезни. И мы ожидаем услышать от него, в чем, собственно, состоит проблема, какие основные уроки голландской болезни для России, как с этим можно было бороться. The floor is yours.
Включай в камеру.
Так, а где еще включить? Вверх, вниз.
Красненькую.
Угу.
Нам на запись трансляцию, один на камеру. Сергей Иванович, а вынеси их туда, приемники, чтобы мы ничего не услышали.
Насколько?
Все, не тот провод. Саша, дай мне тот провод. Не-не, а верните, пожалуйста. Подожди. Есть только короткий. Вот, отлично. У меня просто переходник не влазит, а нож.
Надо держать микрофон подальше.
Okay. For the interpretation, can you hear me? Is this microphone on? Yeah, it is. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to be here. I'm Jan Willem Veldhuizen. I'm a professor of energy economics at the University of Groningen. Two nice elements. Groningen is the university in the Netherlands that's famous because is situated above one of the largest gas fields in Europe and in the world. As a matter of fact, at the time it was discovered in the 60s, it was the largest gas field in the world. The other thing is, well, we started in that history. We started to work with that great gas field, explore it, economize it, make use of it, sell it, use it.
И громкость на всех нам сделай побольше. Это
Совсем большой?
And we learned it. So we were actually we invented the Dutch disease. We started off with the Dutch disease, and it took a while before we noticed that that was a disease. And what I was invited today to talk to you about is some of the lessons that some of the things that we experienced in the Netherlands, and some of the things we might have learned. Actually, I would like to compare this to the dilemmas of family would face when they were in lottery. Basically, in the lottery, you have as parents, the lottery is the parents and the family, you have a couple of dilemmas. And these dilemmas are very much resembling the dilemmas that you face when you all of a sudden...
Сергей Иванович, половину звука.
Да что ж ты?
На обоих.
One of the questions is, will the parents continue to work, or will they become, will they start to consume? Will they start to rapidly consume, or will there be some sort of a plan, financial planning? Another thing that you will discover is that you will probably give your children quite a lot of toys and freedom. And what that does to your children, what it does to the next generation, what is the consequence of the productivity of the next generation, an issue that you see in many countries involved as well. And the third thing is the family is probably going to get a lot of new friends. And are they really your friends? And are they adding to your profit? And are they seeing your contribution to your productivity? Those are basically the dilemmas. And the answers to that, as we now start to know, it has to do with wisdom. And the wisdom has to come from economists and politicians. So my point is there a resource curse? Is there a Dutch disease? Well, actually, it's not a curse. Everybody wants to win the lottery after all. It turns into a curse if you don't employ this wisdom. So that's what I would like to say. So basically, this compares very much to the dilemmas you face if you, well, so to speak, win a resource. Many countries, as this graph is on the countries that are endowed, have the luxury of being endowed with a resource. So there's many countries in many shapes and forms. Natural resources. There's also, you can also have the resource curse if you have another big advantage all of a sudden. If your location is fantastic all of a sudden, or if you have another benefit. But mostly, we talk about resource
Потише вот этот передатчик, приемник. Потише.
As you can see in the graph, Russia has quite a number, not just oil or gas, but has quite a number potentially of resources to add to the curse. So what is the curse? Basically, as an economist, you look at two things. One is optimal extraction. So it's how to get your revenues, how to position your revenues over time, how to do the strategy of earning your revenues. You can do that slowly or fastly. You can do it in one generation or a lot slower. And the other thing, the other side is optimal spending. So if you have it, how to optimally spend, because you can collect it and then spend it. You can collect it while you spend it, while you collect it, and you can have the varying patterns. And you see in the countries across the globe you have to cope with, to try to avoid the resource curse. You see different mixtures and different choices. The optimal extraction is, the theory says, once a resource gets close to the stage where it's finite and where it's empty, the prices go up. If you look at the long history of prices of oil, for instance, you see this pattern. You see that the prices are going up because easy oil is now gone, and okay, we can push that down a little bit by more advanced extraction methods and cheaper extraction methods and so on, but eventually the price is going up. So knowing that, optimally, depends a bit on your type preferences, but optimally what would be best is to leave it in the ground, or to leave it and to sell it when it's at its highest, which is actually a policy that the Dutch government is doing with its gas. It's buying cheap gas at the moment. Gas is very cheap, and we keep that resource that is still left in the underground for the moment that it's getting the rent's getting higher, so that you get more profits. It doesn't make any sense to sell it. But basically, those strategies you see. Play those strategies. The Norwegian government has a similar strategy. question is that an economics question or is it a political question? You see, economists have already difficulties finding the optimal path from the economic point of view. What is economically optimal? Because there's so many uncertainties about the resources that you never know exactly what will be the optimal maximum return of my rent. And you see politicians interfering there. So here you see the dilemmas related to optimal extraction. On the other end, you see the optimal spending, and there basically you face the issue: should we spend it now, quickly, or should we spend it later, or how should that strategy of spending be chosen? And in political reality, you see difficulties keeping the hands of the rents of resources. And you see wisdom, and you see less wisdom in these choices across the globe. And the Netherlands was definitely in the beginning of an extremely wise government. So the diagnosis: what can go wrong? Why do we call it a disease? Well, you have the resource recovery on the left hand. This leads to influx of capital, because people want your resource, people want your Russian gas, Dutch gas in our situation, they want it, you export it. And you have countries around the world that predominantly, their economy is predominantly driven by exports of resources. Chile is an example. 30% of its exports. Large part of the GDP is resource exports. That creates an upward pressure on your currency, and that creates shrinking manufacturing. So the other industries that live on exporting in your country have to face that loss of competitiveness because the currency is and usually they suffer. So you have shrinking manufacturing. So you have this crowding out. It also leads to a growing services industry, the services sector. What you see typically is that the government has this rents. Basically, in most countries it's government owned. The rents of most of the rents are government owned, and the government is going to do all kinds of nice things with this. And particularly, what you see is an expanding government. It's a thing that happens in the Netherlands, expanding government. So at some point, the government was 56% of GDP was government spending. So there's also a crowding out in that respect. And then eventually this leads to higher economic growth, higher prices, higher inflation. So you price yourself out of the markets in terms of your wage costs, and then you have slow growth. Analysis in the Netherlands of the growth that we have had since the 60s, 1.2% growth a year extra. If you compare it, for instance, to Belgium next door to us, with no gas. So, is it a curse or a blessing? Well, despite all the mistakes we made economically, we still grew 1.2%. So you see a graph of the 60s when we discovered this gas field. You must realize that gas was everybody around us had coal, Germany, UK, Belgium, everyone had coal, or oil, and we didn't have oil, we didn't have coal. But we had gas. So what as you can see, we spend it since the 60s. We've spent it at a more or less flat pace. That is a result of a growing economy, but also getting more efficient in energy use, so that more or less cancels each other out. So you see some sort of flat consumption, and it's going to go down now, and that always prices and the war with it. And in the 60s, so since the 60s, we have this experience. And now you can divide the period basically into two. The Dutch government has done one thing very badly and one thing very well. And those are companies. What they did very well is within 4 years' time, they built the infrastructure across the Netherlands. Since then, the Netherlands has become a gas industry on gas, consumption on gas. So we heat on gas, we cook on gas, we don't drive on gas yet. That will not be successful. But we do a lot on gas. So the gas intensity of the country is huge, and that has advantages and disadvantages. Some industries have flourished because we have cheap gas. That is that adds to the bonanza, to the benefits, to the horticulture, world renowned for the Netherlands. And we almost export as much from our horticulture industry as from the gas industry. And that is only because it is very cheap to produce tomatoes in very cold, dark Netherlands, and it has all to do with gas. So the investment in the gas infrastructure that has given us a structural strength in the economy has been a plus. Minus is exactly that phenomenon that I described: increasing wages, spending on very generous social security systems. At some point, after behind Sweden, the most generous social security system in the world, and we became too expensive in other exports territories. Another country that we think in the Netherlands has done very well, Norway. Norway has said we are going to talk about principles of how to. We are going to talk about principles of how to spend. We're not going to spend this. Every new government has its new ideas and it's going to have this money to spend it on whatever way that may be or may not be very wise. But we are going to define now long-term principles, also to the benefit of the future generations. And we have invested in that social welfare fund that is always moving up. Another thing is they avoid the currency risk, so the upward pressure on currency risk, and they do that by ordering that social wealth fund to invest, but not to invest in retail currency, but to invest elsewhere. So they don't have to. This is a very tiny economy, just 4 million inhabitants. They cannot suffer. They cannot afford to suffer from that. An interesting, what I find an interesting region at the moment that is also it's an extreme example of resource curse or the Dutch disease is the Middle East, especially the tiny, small countries in the Middle East, where 95% of the exports is oil or gas, tar, Bahrain. What you see there is the wealth accumulation is enhanced by a few people, very particular choices in terms of distribution. You see the government exploding, so 95% of Qatari and Emirati people, citizens, are in public service jobs, so just 5% are non-public. Employment in these jobs is far below par, so they struggle, and they realize it. Of course, it's nothing new to them, but they realize it, and they have difficulties getting the productivity of their current generation and the future generation on par with other countries. And they have huge consumption spending, so it's difficult not to spend everything on. So there's these big projects that they hope, and it's the good thing they try to do. They try with all these bigger projects
Там звук есть в зале?
Есть. So they want to become the health center of the Muslim world, they want to become the education center, they want to organize
Нет, он пошел оттуда. Трансляцию посмотрите из этого зала. Звук послушайте. Нормальный звук?
So, to conclude, economic dilemmas, but the politicians, shorter term objectives, strategies, ambitions, may interfere, so it may be a lethal cocktail, so institutions have principles on how to spend it that are resilient to which government is forced at the particular moment. Do's and don'ts, investment versus excessive transitory spending, that's a choice, a political choice, and a decision on wealth distribution across generations and between generations. And my point would be is it's hardly a curse, but it is at most a best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Feldhausen, for your interesting presentation. We can learn important lessons from it. And now I would like to give floor to the International Monetary Fund. Last year, in April 2012, the IMF World Economic Outlook contained a special chapter, Chapter 2, right? Chapter 4, right? On implications of resource dependence for macroeconomic policies, and also recommendations how to alleviate negative impact of commodity price volatility. And in one of the authors was Antonio Spillenberger. No? Okay. And Antonio is head of the IMF mission to Russia, and he has extended experience of analysis of Russia's economic policy, in particular fiscal policy. Please.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, я буду говорить по-английски. But just thank you very much. I think this is what my aim here is to condense in about 10 minutes a huge literature on budgets and policy advice that given this literature we can have and how Russia is like. So it's pretty ambitious, but I will try to condense as much as possible. Thanks to Ian that gave a very nice example of the Netherlands, and I will, as they say, everything is nishastila parsanu, so I will see how is the nishastia in various families that don't use wisely the lottery. Well, first of all, Dutch disease. Dutch disease, I thought that it was very interesting to look at the very beginning. This is the original piece from which the name Dutch disease started. It's a piece in the Economist in 79, where they describe the status of the economic, of this curse of this Dutch disease. And you already see some elements which evolve over time: strong guilder, expensive expenses, and so on. You have a lot of elements. Basically, all the economic literature and economic thought in the following 10 years have been dedicated to develop various themes which were originally in this piece. And if you have time, I found it very interesting, just 2 pages, just to see what you see how the journalists got the idea and the economists later on developed. First of all, just to see how big is the disease. Here I have a picture of the world where we just show which countries rely most on commodity exports. As you see, Russia is really the only G8 actually relying heavily on commodity export. This is the characteristic of Russia. But you see, Canada and other countries are also really relevant. This is a little bit an issue because, as you know, the price of energy goes in commodities in general go up and down. Here I'll just show, just a reminder, the real price of energy is an index of gas and oil and other energy-related commodities. You see they had ample fluctuations over time with a huge cycle, but also a lot of volatility. Now, let's go back to the Dutch disease. I think the Dutch disease is a misnomer because we should use the term Dutch diseases, not just Dutch disease. Because people have found many diseases, not just one. Somewhat the idea is that if you have a Dutch disease, you have a bacterium, you ask economists or IMF a vaccine against this disease, and you are hopefully, maybe politicians are against, but you are able to convince and you take this medicine and you are. The reality is much more complex.
Короче, у тебя на белом зале такая же хрень, как и здесь была, со звуком. Ну какая пропадает звук?
Second, we didn't find the proper vaccine for all of them. And here I'm highlighting from a macro point of view just three. First, originally the profession focused on the medium term, the industrialization. And as a student, I focus just on three: short term, medium term, and long term. The short term is the subject of this chapter 4 that FCA mentioned before. Second, medium term is where the profession focuses its attention for several years. And long term is where the economic profession is going now, and I think it's quite interesting. The medium term. Well, there are several definitions of Dutch disease. The one I find more compelling is Dutch disease is a permanent decline in the output of other sectors caused by temporary increasing of exploitation of natural resources. Let me explain a little bit, because this is, I think it's crucial to understand what issue, and let's go inside the disease. You have a discovery of natural resource, oil or gas, or in general exhaustible natural resource. You have a change in relative price, which is in the appreciation of capital inflow, appreciation of real exchange rate, wages go up. This is not yet a disease. Just this is a market reaction, a normal market reaction to a positive development of the economy. You have, as a consequence of these changes in relative price, you have a change of allocation of resources. Again, this is not a disease. This is a reaction of quantity to change in relative prices. Now, the disease is this. Well, when the resource, natural resource is gone, you have used completely the natural resource, the inability to shift back resources from where you put the resources to the other use, that is a problem. That's a big, big, big problem. So, as a result of this, you could end up with lower output at the end of the day. Just to illustrate a very extreme case. Here you have a steady-state growth in a country without natural resources. Every year you grow over time. You discover natural resource, you grow more. This is 1 to 2% that you were mentioning before of Belgium with respect of the Netherlands with respect to Belgium. At a certain point you use completely the natural resources, and you are unable to shift back the resources you spend on natural resources to the rest of the economy. So you have a dramatic drop in output and maybe a lower growth rate. So the profession has focused on various mechanisms why it's difficult to bring back resources from the natural resource sector to the other sectors. And you have dozens of data, really dozens of data, each one focusing on a different issue. To me, but I'm partisan, the one I like the most is Paul Krugman in 87, 88, the narrow moving band, the Dutch disease, and the consequences of misjudgment. I think it's a very nice paper which makes exactly this case. Well, this story is very nice and compelling, intellectually compelling, and it helped Krugman to win the Nobel Prize in the paper also. And so, but it has two problems. First, and let me go back to this, is not, there is no clear evidence of this. Just to give a big picture, in this period, when, between 70 and 80, when prices were going up, all the energy producing countries were growing 1.1% more than other countries, analogous countries without natural resources. In the period where the price went down between 81 and 2001, countries rich in natural resources were growing less, or minus 0.8% than other countries. But this growing less continued also in the decade after, in the 2000s. Countries rich in natural resources grew a little bit less than other countries. So there is not a big correlation, and empirical studies have failed to find a compelling case of a correlation between of this Dutch disease. Also because inherently it's a kind of a dynamic story, because it implies first you grow more because you have oil, Second, you are unable to shift. But to measure this probably is very complicated. So to be fair enough, empirically it's very complicated to find it. But there is another reason why this story was compelling. The story has to do, let's remember, this came out in the 70s, 80s. In the 70s, East Asia was growing very much.